What's up, Dragon Ball Super Family? I'm Legends Michael Carrick, and I'm bringing you my first place Golden Frieza deck list from this weekend's Gencon Regionals. And then I placed top 8 in the Zenkai Cup the day after with a couple misplays under my belt. I'm so excited to bring you guys this deck list. I put so much time and data into this deck list for this event, and really just to figure out this format and come up with some tricks to show y'all. So I'm gonna hop right into it. But now you're all aware of this leader. It's the kill one of your Frieza armies to untap one on the front side and draw a card, or untap two on the back side and draw a card. And then of course on the back side you also get to attack and draw an extra card. So it's draw two on the back side every turn. So given that, you obviously want to awaken as fast as you possibly can. Typically you awaken on turn 3. If your opponent attacks you on their first turn, then you can, and you have a Roshi in hand, then you can awaken on turn 2. So that's pretty cool. Launching right into the deck profile. We have 4 copies of Frieza Call. This is the card obviously you want to open. If you see 1 or 2 in the opening mulligan, you're going to keep both of them. You can use the first one to bring out Frieza Malicious, and then you're going to charge the rest of them. Right? You almost never use them again to look through your deck. You want to make sure you don't bottom deck these because you're going to dig through your entire deck. Uh, in every game almost. So if you bottom deck these, you're just going to have dead cards that you're going to draw at the end of the game. That's why I always suggest charging them to people. Also, it ensures that your Ripos is live. 4 copies of Tagoma Cold as Ice, 4 copies of Genyu, former Galactic Elite. These are still your best openings as well. After your Frieza Call, you just end your turn 1 with this card. Obviously, there are a few niche matchups where you wouldn't do that, like Android 21, Set 20. You wouldn't do that if you're going second. But if you're going first, that's fine. That part hasn't changed. And then for Self-Awakeners, we play 3 copies of Master Roshi. Now, this card is just, mid to late game is not very good. It just becomes a subpar 5k combo mid to late game, and then, an even worse charge. Like I said, you're going to be wanting charging Frieza calls late game, or, dead Baby Dragon unisons. So, if you're forced to charge this late game, it's not really that great. The one Frieza Malicious Streak, obviously to be played off of Frieza's Call. If your first Frieza Call doesn't have it in the life, or doesn't have it in the deck, don't fret, because there's still a chance that your Roshi will pick it out of life, and then you can send it back or surmounting, and then use the Frieza Call to get the last life out of this card. So there's a lot of few tricks you can still do with that card. To pair with that, we play last Self Awakenings. We play 2 copies of Super Saiyan Blue Son Goku and Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta Rivalry. This card's really good. Obviously, early game you can on turn 2 you can pay 2 for it and then take a life. That's the worst case scenario. If your opponent's doing nothing to help you awaken, you pay 2 for this, take a life, and then kill off the 1-drop that you had left to untap 1 going your opponent's turn. If your opponent has battle cards you need to clear or unison you need to clear, you can use this double strike or dual attack to clear that card, right? And then of course the fact that it's got this auto where it switches back to active at during either player's main phase, at the start of either player's main phase, means your opponent can't even attack this if you're on your unawakened side. It's just going to switch back to active, and then now they can't attack. They're going to have to still choose to attack your leader if they want to get their leader effect off. So that's really powerful. We play 2 copies, so if you find yourself in the position on turn 3 where you have one on the board and you have one in hand, you can attack with this one, then you can pay the 1 and choose this, and then now you can attack with this one to also get more life off your leader. So that's really important too. But more importantly, it all synergizes with this Super Saiyan Blue Son Goku versus Golden Frieza Spirit Clash. This is probably the newest card that really propels our deck into the next the Lithosphere or whatever. So this card everybody already knows. You can pay the activate main 2 yellow and then choose your leader most of the time as the cost. And then when you resolve the effect, it plays itself from the Z energy, and then of course your leader can't go to your Z energy, so this just comes in for 2 from your Z energy. And then it's auto, everybody's already familiar. You draw a card and then you KO something in rest mode, ignoring Barrier. That's already really good for the leader, right? Of course, it's a Frieza army, so if you're in a pinch, you can sacrifice it for your leader effect to untap energy and draw another card. But even more importantly, the second activate main can be really abusable. If you have 3 more energy, you can remove this card from the game, from the field, to revive or play from your hand one of these cards, or this super combo that I'll talk about after. Why that's important is on turn 3, if you don't have access to other Self Awakeners, you can revive the Frieza Militia Streak after you've attacked with this, and then sacrifice it from your front side to take another life with this card. It doesn't negate the skills of what it revives or plays from hand, right? That's really important. You can also revive this if you had this in the drop because you comboed it with it and then made surmounting with it from your Z energy. Now you can revive this on turn 3 to take another life off of this card. That's really important. After you attacked with this card, even late game, if you attack with this card and then revive this and then attack with this card, that's 2 attacks or 2 energy. and you drew a card. And then, of course, on your opponent's turn, this will restand to be combo power on your opponent's turn. So that's really cool, too. And then, like, my favorite play on turn 3, if you don't have access to Roshi, but you have this in the drop already, and, like, you have these in hand, you can attack with something to get this in the Z, right? You can play this for 2. That's 2 of your 3 energy. And then, I guess I'll use energy to dictate this. Makes it easier. So you pay this for 2 to play this for 2 energy, and then you'll attack with this, right? Because now you're at 6 life or less if you're on turn 3. So you'll attack with this, get your 20, start pressuring, and then you'll pay the last energy for this card to play from your hand, choosing this as the target for cost. So this can't switch to active mode anymore. But it is a Son Goku, so if it fills the cost for this, you'll take a life for this card, gain like dual attack or double strike, whichever one you think is more appropriate, right? You attack twice with this, then you activate the effect of this card to remove from the game to play this card from the drop, right? Then once you revive this, you can use this effect to sacrifice this card to kill it, to untap your energy, draw a card, and then take a second life from this card, right? And now you can get into your awaken turn. You can play another one drop, do yada yada yada. Like that's another really cool line in case you're in a pinch to awaken. Moving on from this card, probably the most abused card in the deck. We play one copy of this super combo simply because it's a Son Goku super combo 2-drop, right? So like after you've used the super combo, you can put in the Z, then spend it for a Z play. Then later in the game, you can play this card for 2, get your card draw, attack with it, sacrifice it from the game to play this from your drop, then attack with something else, draw a card, and then combo with this and draw another card by reusing the super combo. It's just another way to abuse super combos in the game. Unfortunately, we couldn't max out on those because we really do need the filter effect of this Krillin super combo, right? Like we have too many dead unisons and dead extra cards in this game, or in this deck, given that we're just like a yellow toolbox deck, right? So this helps us get those cards out of our hand, or put them at the bottom of the deck for later use. Sometimes I'll put down the Gohan unison, the 3-drop Gohan unison, so I can see it as a late game finisher. Moving on from there, we've cut the Baby Dragon unison down to 3. After you upgrade this unison into the Gohan bigger unison, like this card just becomes a dead draw, right? Like you're either bottom decking it with Krillin, or more likely than not, you're just charging it. Obviously, in a pinch, it can become a 1 energy 15k attacker, even later game, by reviving the skill list, and of course it generates a lot of tempo by being a 15k attacker that also untaps you too. There are scenarios where you'll just use the 0 to draw card. Like if you have a Ripos developed from your opponent's previous turn and you have this on the board, there's no reason to revive the 1-drop. Like the 15k swing is not worth the extra energy at that point. Because then you're just paying an energy for, like if you think about it, you're losing a draw to gain a 15k swing. Like that's just not worth it most of the time. So instead, you just use the 0 to draw a card and then attack with the Ripos and sacrifice that card for energy, right? That's just more efficient, and then, especially if you're going to upgrade into the bigger Gohan anyway. Before I move on, I'm going to mention that this is a best of 3 deck with best of 1 pre-side in mind. So some of these regionals will have 2-day events where you play best of 1 pre-side for the day 1, and then day 2 you have to keep the same deck but go into top coat with a best of 3 in mind. So there's going to be a lot of changes in this deck, or a lot of like different pieces in this deck to make sure that I can cover a wider spread of matchups in the best 3 top cut while still being able to just best of 1 pre-side for whatever matchup I need. Saying that, I only play 2 copies of the Gohan unison now because of that. I needed the extra slot for a different unison for a specific matchup, but if that matchup is not what I'm facing against, I'll just bring in the 3rd Gohan unison from my side deck. It's obviously still one of the finishers of the deck. It's still a good mid-game piece. The fact that you can, like, by the time you play, it's going to have 5 or 6 markers, and you can +1 to make it, like, just egregiously out of range of removal. And then it's still a blocker to make sure you make it to your next turn is really powerful. 2 copies of Secret ID. I used to play 3 just to remove those anti-untap cards, but now I have other cards that are more efficient at doing that, or probably less efficient, but are more synergistic with the deck for removing those cards. So Secret ID is still the overall choice. Just clearing battle cards so you can poke for life is really important in this deck. Clearing blocker negators or blocker negates and free tokens is also just really relevant. So Secret ID is still king of the overrounds for this deck. 2 copies of Sin. This card's better into a red format. In this current format, it's not as great. Like it's terrible versus Green Gohan, not great versus Black Trunks. It's obviously really good into set 2021, Android 21. Really good into like yellow matchups. Specifically versus 21, it's just amazing, right? Like the first one, they're gonna have to clear with the SCR, and then the second one just deters the 8 drop. Like while this card's on the board, it deters the 8 drop from ever coming down. None of their standard attackers get over this card for free, right? Because they're all just 20k, so it's just a really good like card to have out versus them. 4 copies of Ride Post, probably just like the best card in this deck. When this card finally gets limited to 1 in the future, probably, then this deck will lose a lot of power. Because your ability to develop a card that, like, it does more in this deck than any other deck, right? Because it not only is it floodgating your opponent and being a 15k attacker, it's also giving you an untap 2 on your following turn, like, and a draw 1 off your leader. Like, that's, like, really important, especially if you go into turn 6 with one of these developed. You can now slam your cooler SCR pretty like haphazardly, because then you can just sacrifice this, and now you can have cooler counter backing up the cooler SCR, which is almost impossible to lose with. Um, but yeah, obviously, like you want to try to end your opponent's turn by having one of these developed. Every time you do that going into your turn, that's 2 extra energy you get to play with for free. Like that's egregious. Don't waste that opportunity by playing like a random Tagoma or Ginyu or like using your baby Higher Dragon to play at 1 drop. Like use that two energy to generate some tempo and advantage. Then we go into our slew of 1 drops extra cards. So yellow, in my mind, is like the most toolbox color. Like we have an answer for everything in the game, right? Like we can do everything. So by that margin, there's a lot of the cards you don't need. There's gonna be a lot of like chaff in this deck that isn't good for every matchup, right? So like let's say you're in BO3 top cut and you're playing game 1. Like obviously charge the extra cards you're not gonna need in that matchup. That's gonna be on you as the player to have that knowledge. And then keep the cards that you need for that matchup. So obviously T-Blow for like yellow matchups and Android 21. Um, it's really better versus Android 21 than other blue matchups. Like I don't even bring the extra one in versus non-Android 21 decks, just because like this being able to hit the extra card or the Z deck ramp card is just more important than like defending friends. Defending friends barely hurts this deck, right? Like it maybe hits your cooler turn, but by then like they have 5 cards in hand. Who cares? You're just gonna kill through defending friends. The copy of Cold Bloodlust, this card gets sided out versus aggro all the time. Like versus like Black Trunks or Red Pan or Green Gohan, this card just gets cut like every time. But versus not those deck, this card's insane. Probably the worst extra card in the deck. This card is just here for aggro. Uh, and I'd rather have it in the main for aggro than have it in the side and not have it in the main for top cut. But like versus not aggro, this card comes out and gets traded for time magic every single time. This card just doesn't feel great ever. Except when aggro's trying to push you from 5 to 3, then you just keep this in a mulligan and you don't let yourself get pushed from 5 to 3. Copy of Time Magic. This card's insane versus like Android 21. It's insane versus Koitsukai in the fact that like it's not this. So you can still sparking negate an attack like a double or triple strike and then not have to pay 2 cards from your hand by generating that blocker. Obviously versus 21 or any kind of deck that plays the 21 SCR, when they play the 21 SCR and they go to attack with it, you just freeze it in place. Like that's really powerful already. That sets it up in rest mode so you can kill it with a bunch of your anti-rest mode cards, or like it just prevents it from blocking on your turn or getting the 2 attacks off on its turn. 1 copy of Nimbus for Koitsukai and yellow matchups. Obviously aggro decks too, like it's really powerful. But like just Koitsukai, when the Koitsukai you just flying Nimbus versus yellow decks. Your opposing yellow deck's gonna have T-Blow up for turn 4 or 5, so you just Nimbus instead. Now they have to choose between giving up more than half their turn or just taking the floodgate to the chest. That's really good. Your deck is focused on clearing boards a lot, so a lot of opponents will start with a leader swing now, which plays directly into Nimbus, especially if they're trying to play around Vegito counterplay, right? Like that's just the problem with the yellow. We have a counterplay in every form right now. So like if you clear your opponent's board, now they have to worry about Vegito. So they're gonna swing at their leader to not like to get a free attack in, which is kind of silly in my opinion, but just not get blocked by Vegito, right? So that just allows you to punish with like Nimbus or Forbidden Power. Like they do the same thing. Forbidden Power is obviously better if you have blockers up like the Gohan Unison or Sin Shenron or the blocker from the Z deck. But more importantly, Forbidden Power is just another way to deal with those anti-untappers early game. I wouldn't charge it early game in case they play one between turns 1 to 3. After turn 4, you can just rely on Secret Identity to clear those cards. But early game, you can use the Activate Battle of this card to tap those guys, and then you can clear with a different battle card afterwards. Same thing applies to Power of the Super Saiyan. I wouldn't charge it early because it lets you get rid of those anti-untappers. Versus most decks, I would just charge it late game. The card doesn't really feel great. The ability to draw a card Actually, it's sometimes detrimental to you because you're just going to be decking yourself out. Most decks won't play into this card anymore, especially because nobody's really playing Unisons. And then the only color it's really good against is blue, because a lot of times you can attack with like a Riposte or like a really weak 15k attack early game, or like your leader, and then your opponent's not going to block that with Boo right away. So you just power the Super Saiyan, tap down their Boo, and go for some tempo. So you can bypass that defense of theirs, right? Um, but more often than not, I find myself charging this card or negating with it. And then the last one that we play is a Black Kamehameha. Um, it's just another way to deal with those anti-untappers, like I said, in a way that's synergistic with the deck because it's a yellow extra card that we can charge or use. It lets you get around wide boards versus aggro. It's really good versus Majin since they're all 20k swings, and it provides you like an extra super combo to use at the cost of 1 energy. So that's really powerful. Also, just like the fact that you charge any of these cards that can be 2 of, so obviously not this and not this, but like if you ever charge any one of these, like your opponent now has to consider these are in your deck, right? Charging a card mentally puts in your opponent's mind that you either already have a second copy or you might be playing more in your deck at some point, right? So now they're playing around other copies of these cards in your deck. Oh, so that's something to think about, especially with cards like this. Like you charge Black Kamehameha once, and your opponent will never play into it again. So that's really good for you, right? So that's the entire extra card lineup. It's this 8 plus the 4 Frieza calls in the main deck. It's more than enough for Riposte, I promise you. And then going into some of the tech cards that we play because it's best of 1 pre-side plus best of 3 top cut. We play 1 copy of this Trunks. This is strictly for any deck that plays the Android 21 SCR. You just hold it in hand versus those decks, and you wait for them to play the SCR. Once they play the SCR, you time magic it down, and then on your turn you slam this for 3, and you one-shot that SCR because it negates the skills of the SCR and then KOs it. That's pretty cool. And then, of course, since Defending Friends doesn't punish Unison swings, it usually just checks back the 2 life that they gained from playing their SCR, right? Even if, like, full power counter can't clear this card. So, like, you'll swing it if they full power counter, like, your attack goes through, you take that life, and then you swing it to the leader, and you take the other life back. And then sometimes, like, if you're going to, like, your cooler play, it's -3 lets it clear itself from the boards. Like, on turn 6, you can play your cooler SCR, and then you can -3 to get itself off the board so your opponent can't use it as energy in the 21 matchup. Then you can start attacking with cooler pretty freely. So that's really nice, too. 2 copies of Sun Gohan Trusted Ally. This is for the 2 most popular decks in the format, Green Gohan and Set 21, or Set 20, Android 21. Which is this obviously everybody knows how this applies in the Green Gohan matchup, but in the 21 matchup, like this lets you play into full power counter because you can they force you to discard a card and then get rid of a card from your Z energy. So once you do that, you can discard this. This will play itself, and then you combo this as part of that attack, which then Z's it, which then lets you attack with something else and discard the other one, and get rid of the previous one, and then of course do the same thing. So that's pretty cool. And then in a pinch versus the 8 drop, if you just need to like negate, like you need to develop Riposte and not die, you can negate and then you can like discard both of these and then they'll revive themselves and draw a card to replace. So you didn't really lose out anything versus the 8 drop. Plus they become combo power for like later attacks in that turn, so that's really cool too. And then like versus anything that's not those 2 decks or hand control, like these are just really easy side out slots. 1 copy of Mutaito for every troublesome 8 drop in the game that's not the Android 21 8 drop. So this includes stuff that this is good for is like the Black Trunks 8 drop, Green Gohan's 8 drop, Frieza Swap's 8 drop, Vegito, the set 2 Vegitos, all of their 8 drops. Like this card just feels really good versus all of that. Don't forget that you can window 1 with this card to counterplay it, and then its auto won't trigger until auto checks happen. So like if they counterplay this in window 1, you can just play a second one from your hand in window 2. So that's really cool. Even if you don't have a second one in your hand, you should always window 1 request this, because then that makes your opponent think twice about even trying to counterplay this. The fact that you even went through the trouble of mentioning window 1 means you probably have the second one, right? 1 copy of Cooler is a standard in yellow. It's really good versus blue, really good versus yellow. It's terrible versus like red, black. I keep 1 copy in for Green Gohan in case we get to like turn 6 or 7 and I need to use the Cooler to stop their floodgate. But like even then it's terrible because they still draw and they can just activate another one. Like, it's not great. And then, of course, the 2 finishers in the deck. This is the one I play on turn 5. This is the one I play on turn 5. This is the one I play on turn 6. You develop this on 5 because it's a blocker, and then you develop this on 6 because paired with this card, it's almost impossible to not win the game. And the worst case scenario, you can sacrifice this off after you play this, so you have 3 energy up for Cooler. That's if you didn't develop Riposte or something on your opponent's turn. Um, what more is to say? Like, it's just like the standard finisher of this deck. This deck gave like this is just the most ridiculous SCR for this leader. Moving into the side deck, it's a lot of like additional cards for the main deck. But like, if you'll notice, I didn't play any Vegetos in the main deck. It's really hard to create the two Z energy in this deck to make this card, keep the two Z energy to make this card relevant. We're using our Z deck a lot in this deck. If you notice, there's only like 4 or 5 threats in the main deck, which is very low. The Z deck is the rest of our threats. But Vegeto's really good versus decks that push you really early, like Red Pan or like AOD, stuff like that. Things that are hyper aggressive. Versus like the Mirror or Yellow, Vegeto's not as great anymore. Even in the Mirror, it's not great. If they play the Trunks Unison, like unless they're desperate, this card's not doing anything. Because you're just gonna play it, and then they're gonna play the Trunks Unison, and then they're just gonna draw a card. Right, like you got no value. Now it's a blocker. Most people won't play the Trunks Unison as their first move in the Mirror. That's just not realistic. One copy of Jiren as the nuclear deterrence. 2 more copies of Matato for the aforementioned matchups. 1 extra Nimbus for those aggro matchups in yellow. 1 extra copy of Nimbus for those matchups where the blocker negate is bad, so non-aggro Nimbus will come in. What I mean is like if you're playing against like if you're not playing against like Pan, Green Gohan, or like I don't know, those are the only 2 I can think of right now. Then like this card will swap out for that Frieza Army reinforcement. Obviously, if you're playing against Pan or Gohan or any hyper aggro, this card will come in addition to to that card. 1 copy of Cunning for all those cards that are playing decks that are playing Sun Goku Divinity, and then also for set 2021, of course. 2 copies of Smoke Dragon for those decks playing the Hit Unison or like Black Trunks. Like clearing their Unison is a really good way to kill them, especially if they're like 4. You can clear their Unison so they can't Z Awaken anymore, and then just push them right there. It's also really good. It should be noted that this is also really good versus Frieza Swap. It clears the 5-drop that they leave in active mode. It's also good versus like self-control. It clears like the 14k that they leave in active mode that they keep re-triggering their leader with. 1 copy of Death Blaster. It's just another nuclear deterrence. Like it's really good in the mirror, obviously, because you can stop the cooler. SCR, it's okay to self-control because if they ever do the tap 7, you can like negate all the cards coming in. It's really good to just charge it because then your opponent wonders if you have a second one or if you have Bloodlust already in hand. 2 copies of Swift Retaliation Cooler. This is just a really good answer to set 2021. You just have this card every time for the full power counter if you side these in. And the trade is just egregiously in your favor. They paid 4 to counterplay or to counterattack you. You paid 3 to prevent that counterattack, and then draw a card and gain another attacker and force your initial attack through. Not that your initial attack was not going to be forced through anybody. Like if your initial attack was like a battle card, which is the best way to do it. You attack with like Sin Shenron, tempting them to use full power counter, and then they'll full power counter. You tap 3 for this card, and now your tempo gain is incredible. Your Sin Shenron continues, so they have to combo out of that or take it. You gained a card, removed one of your opponent's cards that they would have been able to attack you with, and then you also gain an attacker. Like that's amazing. It's also good in the mirror. Not great versus other yellow decks because other yellow decks you can just punch through with like your like Repulse doesn't stop you. That's what most other yellow decks rely on, right? But in the mirror it's really strong, obviously, because you both just have a bunch of energy to play with. 1 copy of Vestitus on Gohan. Like this is just a swap out for the Trunks. If you're not playing against a deck that plays the Android 21 SCR, you're just gonna take out that Trunks Unison. You're gonna put this Unison right in for it. And then the second copy of Tyrannical Blow for yellow matchups, Android 21 blue decks, and specifically blue decks that are Android 21. Other blue decks, like you don't care about defending friends because your finisher is like 1 battle card attack and then like multiple unison attacks and the leader attack, right? So defending friend doesn't stop you, but like the ability to have this to shut down the Android 21's early game ramp is really big. This is also really good versus self-control because you can negate like defending friends even though it doesn't hurt you, but then you can use the second half of the effect to blank Zamasu Deity's Wrath or whatever, and then now you can clear that card. And then of course in the mirror you can hit a right pose with this and then blank this card, and now you can clear this with skills. So that's really important too. Moving on into the Z deck. My Z deck's a little different than most Golden Z decks, I'm pretty sure. So obviously we have the Surmounting, that's the same as everybody. We have the Goku, we have the Vegeta, that's the same as everybody. And that's about where my Z deck ends from everybody else's. I don't play an Oolong because I think there's nothing to copy in this deck that I care about. I play 2 copies of Frieza, just a warm-up. It's probably my favorite card. One of my favorite cards in the Z deck, if not my favorite. It's a lot of text that doesn't work with your leader, but it's a 1/1 15k swing. So a lot of times you're going to be passing with 3 energy to your opponent, so you can have 1 energy for right pause, 1 energy to feign, what do you call it? Vegeta's Final Flash, or to use another extra card or use a second negate, right? This lets you use that 3rd energy that you would have had to leave up, right? Lets you being a 1/1, it lets you put like specific cards in the drop from your Z energy. So like if you early game Z'd like one of these, or you early game Z'd your super combo, like it lets you put those in your drop so you can re-abuse it with this card, right? So that's really cool. It facilitates that play already. But then it's just a free poke, and then it becomes like a target, a focus for your opponent on their turn. They're not going to just let you keep a 15k around. If they do, you just get another free attack on your next turn, right? So that's already really good for you. So meaning they either have to spend an attack into it, or they have to spend some kind of removal on it, which is like, sure, most removal is attached to cards that are already efficient, but like they have to do that line now. So that's already really good. Being a 1/1 15k means you just spent like 1 energy to either take a life or to draw another card out of your opponent's hand. That's already a bunch of value for 1 energy, especially in a deck that gets 2 energy back every turn. Then the really niche Sun Gohan Master Student technique. It's a 2/1, so being the 1Z cost is like really important once again because it lets you do this, like set this stuff up. It's a blocker 16k. Being 16k is really relevant because you can block your opponent's leader swings or one of their 15k attacks, and then they just can't clear it for free. So that's really relevant. It also gains barrier until the end of your opponent's turn. So that's really relevant when you're trying to push through like Boo in blue decks, or you're trying to push through the blue SGR. Since it has barrier, it just can't be removed. It's a really good way to finish the game as a barrier threat. Also, if you just need a blocker because you need a defensive turn to like restabilize yourself, that's a good way to do it. And then the last card is probably, I would say it's my favorite card in the Z deck. It's SSB Son Goku Finishing Blow. Bandai definitely did not intend for us to play this card as a 2/3, but we're playing it as a 2/3. They intended you to bring this out from the Wii, that was for the deck it was built from, right? But like 2/3, while the 3 is a pretty hefty cost, the 2 is really good in this deck because you just untap the 2 on your leader, and it was a 0/3 if you really think about it, right? It's got deflect, dual attack naturally, and then if your opponent has 5 more cards tapped, which they will by the time you play this card because it's mid to late game card, it also gains barrier and critical for the turn. That's huge. Those are 4 insane keyword skills to have on a 2 energy card. The 10k on it's pretty deceiving, but because every time it attacks, it gains 5k and then KOs something in rest mode, and that's not limit 1 or once per turn, right? Like that's really powerful. So it becomes a 15k and then a 20k turn effectively for crit while clearing 2 cards. Like that's just a better version of this Vegeta, except for the fact that it doesn't ignore barrier, right? So like if your opponent has a bunch of threats on the board that don't have barrier, like this card's better. If your opponent has a single barrier threat that you absolutely have to remove, the Vegeta's better. That's just that's what the Z card's used for. That's the entire 54 card list. I trimmed as much as I could because we want our early game to be really, really consistent. Once we get into the mid to late game, it's almost impossible um, to lose with this deck, in my opinion, because you just have a tool for everything. As long as you have the proper like player knowledge and experience, like this deck will serve you right. I'm sorry this video went a little long. I was really excited to talk about this golden list because like I said, I put so much effort into this deck, building it for the current format and like kind of figuring out these like different sequences that we can use to eke out just a little bit more advantage each time we play a turn. With that being said, Gencon was awesome. The crew I was with was so much fun to be with. I'm really glad I get to play with these guys as much as I do. It was really awesome seeing everybody there at Gencon this year. I love hanging out with you guys, even meeting new people, talking to you, listening to your ideas, or like just hearing like you got something out of these deck profiles. Really, really excites me. So I really hope to see you guys at the next event. For me, that'll might be Nashville, more likely be South Carolina, but I was really excited to play with all of you guys, and I hope to see and meet more of you next time.